Hi, everyone. We are moving on in our series now. And as you can see on here, oh, and that's Tito. Hold on, let's see if he wants to say hello to the camera. He does. Here's Tito. He might help me. He might bark. I'm not quite sure what's happening. I've added determining important ideas to this list of reading comprehension strategies that we have been using and talking about all year long. We started that process of really talking about what's really important to understand and remember as we're reading. And that's one strategy that is new, and we'll keep practicing that for the next week or so to come. So if we review some of the reading strategies that we've gone through over this year, we have visualization or visualizing, making inferences about the character, wondering and questioning, using text features, and determining important ideas. I just wanted to kind of go over that so you know that those are some of the things that you can do while you are reading during your day. The book we're reading today to talk about determining important ideas is called Lifetimes, and it is written by David L. Rice, and it's illustrated by Michael S. Maydak. And you can maybe notice a change in scenery for me right now, and I'm trying all different sorts of things to kind of keep Tito quiet and to find a quiet space in the house. And it is sometimes very hard. I'm sure some of you sometimes find it hard to find a quiet space in your house. So we got to do what we got to do. Lifetimes is about how long an animal or a plant is expected to live. And what we're going to read about today are ants, army ants. Okay? So the first question, as it says on the top of the screen, is what do you think you know about ants? I'll give you some pause and some think time. What do you think? Well, I don't have Patrick with me here to talk. Tito is going up the stairs. Hold, let me show you. Let me show you. Oh, wait, he was going right up those stairs, and now he's, oh, do you see him? He was right there in the corner of that screen. Tito! And he's not supposed to be going upstairs. I don't know. I think for myself, I know ants, they can be maybe black. Some are red. Some bite, I think. If they get in my house, I'm kind of annoyed by it. That's about it so far. So I'm going to read this passage twice. You know, that's what we do. We always read it once just to kind of understand what's happening, and then the second time for a closer focus in. So this first time that I read it, what I would like you to focus on is what you're learning about ants. That's all that you need to do. If you want to visualize this, you may. If you want to write down notes, you may. You do whatever that you need to, where the first one is where you're focusing on what you're learning about army ants. Okay, so here we go. Let me show you this picture. Like from the cover of it, it's very interesting because the pictures in it seem a little different than what I would have expected. So here is what it looks like. A lifetime for an army ant is about 3 years. Army ants are famous for their ability to work together to accomplish amazing things. They march along like soldiers, sometimes a million at a time. Nothing can stop them. When they come to a river, they make an ant bridge of themselves to get across. If the river is very wide, they form large ant balls, and float to the other side. Army ants eat mostly insects, spiders, and small animals, although they have been even known to eat horses, cows, and even tigers when they are tied up or caged. People who live in areas with army ants have to leave their home for a day or two when the ants come marching through. When they return, their houses are completely free of rats, cockroaches, and other pests. I don't want to show you the picture here. So then the question here would be, what interesting things have you learned about army ants? Now, before I read this passage for a second time, I want to ask the question that was at the bottom of the last screen that said, what interesting things have you learned about army ants? I thought it was quite interesting in the text that it said that they can be in the millions and do these really big, large tasks like cross rivers and things. I'm sure there are other details that you've picked up on and maybe you were surprised by that, like I was when the first time I read it. So now we're going to go on to the second time where I read it. And we always know that when it's a second read, we're thinking about something else that's different than the first. The first time was kind of just to learn all you could about army ants. And now the second time is what I want you to think about is what the author wants you to most understand and remember from this passage. What do you think the author most wants you to understand and remember from this passage? There must be something that they're saying through their words. And what is that? What are we trying to get from what the author is trying to tell us about army ants? So here goes the second read. Follow along, please. A lifetime for an army ant is about 3 years. Army ants are famous for their ability to work together to accomplish amazing things. They march along like soldiers, sometimes a million at a time. Nothing can stop them. When they come to a river, they make an ant bridge of themselves to get across. If the river is very wide, they form large ant balls and float to the other side. Army ants eat mostly insects, spiders, and small animals, although they have been known to eat horses, cows, and even tigers that are tied up or caged. People who live in areas with army ants have to leave their home for a day or two when the ants come marching through. When they return, their houses are completely free of rats, cockroaches, and other pests. We have had another change in scenery, and I have 2 dogs sitting right in here. Hold on, let me show you. 2 dogs kind of working right there in my office next to me, and we're going to hope that they stay quiet for me to get through this part of the lesson. All right, now that we've read it a second time, it's time for us to kind of focus a little bit more narrow on what's important to understand and remember. The first time you were just reading it or listening to it to see what you could learn about army ants. And then the second time I asked you to kind of think a little bit more closely, tightly about something else. And so the question is, what do you think is most important to understand and remember in this passage? Or if you had to say what the passage was about in one sentence, what would you say? As you can see, it's short. It's something that doesn't give a lot of details, but really narrows it down to what is important to understand and remember. That's what we do when we're trying to find the important ideas of a piece of a passage. What is the author trying to let us know? Now, we have always talked about using the sentence starter for one to say, this is my idea and here's my reason why. So here I could say, what seems to be important, or what I think is important to understand and remember in this passage is, and the reason I think this is, as you can see, it's easy to always use this kind of sentence starter, right? Well, here's what I'm trying to say, my important idea to understand in the passage, and here's my reason why. Okay? So I think in this passage about army ants that we just read, what's important to understand and remember is that army ants work together to get really big jobs done. The reason I think this is, if they need to cross a river, they make either an ant bridge or they make an ant ball to get across. You might have other reasons to support that. That's perfectly fine. If I were to say, hey, I think what's important to understand is that army ants can kill a cow and eat it, that wouldn't be what's important to understand. That would be maybe a detail that supports something larger. Because if I really think about what's important about this army ant is not that it can eat large animals, but what it is really saying is that when they work together, they can get large things done more than their tiny, tiny little bodies. We're on our second story now, or second piece of text from Lifetimes by David L. Rice. And remember, a lifetime is what an animal or a plant is how long it's expected to live. And yesterday we started off with, or sorry, the previous lesson that we started off was army ants. And the first thing I asked you was, what do you know? What do you think you know about ants? And I asked you to listen for the first time around in something that you're going to learn about them. And then I asked you for the second read to really kind of focus on what's the most important thing that you think the author wants you to understand and remember. Now, you might have said, oh, I didn't really get the important part of that army ant. The army ant part, it's okay. We're going to practice the skill over and over and over again. And then you'll begin to see more and more, more and more of what it means to find what's kind of really important for you to understand and remember in a piece of text and why you think that. Mochi is another dog that I'm dog sitting right now, and he happens to hear noises outside. Now he's growling. So thanks for understanding. That's my excitement right now. I'm just going to have to go with it. I'm going to be flexible and take it. Okay. We're reading about elephants. Okay. And a lifetime for an elephant is about 65 years. That's what it says at the top. Now, before I begin, I want you to kind of set your brain, because we're really good at that, focusing on our brain where it needs to go. What do you think you know about elephants? Let's start there. I'm going to give some pause time. So for the first read through that I do, what I'll want you to do is try to listen for some new learning in the piece of text. Okay. There's a picture that's been provided. Sorry, a little too close. A lifetime for an elephant is about 65 years. Elephants have feelings much like those you have. They make loud, joyful, trumpeting sounds when they meet other elephants. They care for other elephants that are sick or injured. If a baby or friend dies, they show their sadness by refusing to eat or by moaning and crying. Elephants are among the few animals that weep tears when they are very, very sad. Although elephants are the largest animals on land, they don't kill or bother other animals. When ponds and streams dry up, elephants use their trunks to dig down to water. When they finish drinking, they let other animals drink. Without water, these animals would die. So that was the first read through, and I'll be asking you, what interesting things have you learned about elephants from this passage? What interesting things have you learned about animals from this passage? Give you some pause as we move on to the next slide. There are some interesting things that I learned from the first reading about elephants. Now follow along as I do read the second time. And this time, of course, what I want you to focus on is think about what seems most important to understand and remember from this passage. Again, during the second read, think about what seems most important to understand and remember from this passage. From Lifetimes by David L. Rice. A lifetime for an elephant is about 65 years. Elephants have feelings much like those you have. They make loud, joyful, trumpeting sounds when they meet other elephants. They care for other elephants that are sick or injured. If a baby or friend dies, they show their sadness by refusing to eat or by moaning and crying. Elephants are among the few animals that weep tears when they are very, very sad. Although elephants are the largest animals on land, they don't kill or bother other animals. When ponds and streams dry up, elephants use their trunks to dig down to water. When they finish drinking, they let other animals drink. Without water, these animals would die. So then to go back to that question, you might have to hear this again or read it another time, more than just twice, which is totally fine. What do you think is the most important to understand and remember in this passage? We have the same questions to discuss after because we're trying to practice the skill of determining important information. So the question is, what do you think is most important to understand and remember in this passage? Or if you had to say what the passage was about in one sentence, what would you say? I know there's lots to go through, and I actually had to read this passage twice myself when I first read it, because it talks about a whole bunch of things of elephants showing emotions, and it talks about letting other animals have water. And I couldn't really focus on one sentence. What would I say if I needed to just explain what this was saying in one sentence? And that was kind of hard for me. But then I said to myself, don't forget this part, which I said to myself how it's so cute that it's a little elephant. Don't forget that I can use this stem to help me. So what seems important to understand and remember in this passage to me is that elephants show emotion and kindness like humans do. And the reason I think this is because it talked about how they make joyful sounds when they meet other animals, or they cry when something bad happens. And that was what I was using in my mind to think about what's important to understand and remember in this passage. This is a brand new technique that this reading curriculum presents. And we used to do think, pair, share all the time. I mean, we still do it. Where I ask you to think about I ask you a question, ask you to think about it, and then share it with your partner. Now they're introducing a new one, and I actually wish we were in school so I could see this happening. It's called Think, Pair, Write, where actually you write down what you've been thinking or sharing with your partner. So that's why this question, it says, what do you think is the most important to understand and remember from the passage about elephants? Share your thinking with your partner, then write your ideas on the line below. You might, again, have to share your thinking with a family member or a friend that you might meet virtually or on the computer. It might have to be Patrick, like my stuffed animal dog that happens to be taking, do you see Patrick? He's taking a nap here. Big time nap. And Tito, who's also taking a nap on the ground. Or you just might want to think to yourself, and that's okay. I would want to have you write this idea on the lines below and maybe say what I think the most important thing to understand and remember from the passage about elephants is, and then don't forget to write the part that the reason I think this is, okay? Because that'll really help you frame your answer. And you might say, Ms. Lee, I want to say that maybe it's a little bit different than what you said in the slide before. That's okay. There's other things, different messages that you can walk away from this, from the elephant passage. Listen to it again if you need to. That's okay. Once you've finished this and finished writing it down, it is time for IDR. And then in the corner it says, when you IDR, I want you to think about which ideas in your text seem to be important to understand and remember, to kind of practice what we did with the army ants and the elephants in your own IDR book. Okay, we'll see you soon.